Welcome to the Branded Assets Podcast, your place for hot takes on business, brands, and billion-dollar gossip. I'm your host, Kate Bouchard. Thanks for being here. Welcome to today's Rich Go Rundown episode, where we're breaking down the latest in business, brand gossip, and billion-dollar deals. Again, I'm with my wonderful co-host, Ada Slavinsky, and today we're chatting about Etsy's anti-Amazon campaign, the World Cup Stadium name cover-up, which you may have seen all over social media. And Ada wants to gossip a little bit about Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau. So I'm very happy to oblige in our last rundown segment before we take a little bit of a break for summer. Looking forward to summer, Ada. I know your daughters are out of school now, right?
They are, yes. And we have a full house over here all the time. It's not only my kids, but their friends. And they have quite a rich social life in the summer. So lots of bopping around.
I love that. So many memories from when I was a kid of like running around the neighborhood barefoot and, hanging out in friends' backyards. So it's that time of year. It's so lovely to see. Okay, well, let's get into our stories today. So the first that I wanted to chat through with you is this anti-Amazon campaign from Etsy. They launched this recently, this positioning really where they're focused on being like the anti-Amazon. And it's interesting to me because it's like, has Amazon become so dominant and Jeff Bezos so repelling that the most effective marketing strategy is like simply saying, you're not Amazon. And the brilliance of this campaign is that it references Jeff Bezos, but without actually naming him or naming Amazon directly. It's highlighting real Etsy sellers, like real people who are named Jeff, and positioning them against this one mega billionaire controlling commerce. So the messaging that you may have seen includes headlines that read 5,000 other Jeffs that you can shop from. One Jeff should not rule commerce, and shop non-billionaire Jeffs, which I absolutely love. I think it's so smart because immediately everyone knows what you're talking about without you actually having to say it. And it creates this villain without being like super mean-spirited. It's tapping into this growing consumer fatigue with these billionaire class men. And I think it was kind of well-timed around the Met Gala and Jeff Bezos' basic sponsorship of the Met Gala. Anna Wintour herself was apparently quite taken aback by how upset people were about, their donation and their appearance at the Met Gala this year. So this marketing campaign makes a lot of sense to me. It was well timed. I think it also reminds people that every Etsy purchase actually is supporting an individual, an entrepreneur, reframing shopping as a decision that you're making based on moral values as well. So just super smart.
I have a very different take on this. And the reason is so many small businesses actually use and rely on Amazon as one of their main distribution platforms. So say you start a small business, you can either sell on Etsy or you can sell on Amazon. The amount of customers that you will be able to reach on a platform like Amazon is just far and beyond what you will reach on Etsy. That's how it's set up. That's why Jeff is as wealthy as he is. And I don't know, when did we start vilifying people who have been successful and have made money? You look at, not only the small businesses that are able to profit through selling on Amazon, but the employees who benefited from having the stock options that they did at the beginning, people who have invested in Amazon. You and I talk often about investing and how we're able to make money doing that either in the long term or in the short term. There's nothing wrong with having a platform that makes money. And yes, there are other ways to shop. There's other ways to support local business. We often opt to do that when we can, going down the street, shopping locally at a small boutique, locally at a grocery store. That's great for some things. But when you look at a business that is looking for distribution, there's really nothing like Amazon. So this campaign really resonates in a very different way for me. I think they're actually trying to leverage off of Amazon's success, and I don't like it. It doesn't make me want to shop on Etsy more. It makes me think, oh, Etsy is just playing small. They're playing to the consumer who's wanting to shop only based on values. And I will shop on Etsy for certain things that are made, someone's making a table or making a kind of textile piece. Etsy is a great place for that. But this doesn't attract me there more than it would have otherwise.
This is super interesting to me. You're taking a very contrarian perspective, and I love it because it opens it up for dialogue and like looking at it from different angles. And that's why this conversation is always so fun. But you're someone who shops on Poshmark and loves secondhand and loves supporting craft, as I know that you do. So I think, we could get into all the ways that I do believe that Amazon takes advantage of small business owners. As someone who had a product and a small company that was looking to scale using Amazon, I could take you through all of the horrific things, like the margin that they take, the rules that they have around you can't have it priced anywhere cheaper than on Amazon, or else they're going to take it down from Amazon. The return policies that are debilitating to small business, the essentially like damage that can do to business owners. Yes, you get open up to different distribution, and it works for maybe some companies at certain scale with certain products lines with certain margins, but there is definitely, tons of discussion too, like around worker rights and unionization and all of those things with Amazon, especially during COVID, that like it makes sense to me that consumers don't want to support billionaires like this who are not contributing enough to society in relation to the wealth that they have. As far as, you look at like anytime his ex-wife gives money to charity, she's, exalted as the example of don't be like Jeff Bezos, be like her. So Mackenzie Scott. So, I think that regardless of what you think about Amazon, if you shop there or if you don't, the positioning that they've taken, and like it's when you look at consumer sentiment against Amazon and against Jeff Bezos himself, it's a smart move for Etsy because they're leveraging that conversation in the consumer sentiment space.
I mean, the interesting thing is, now we are officially in a recession in Canada, at least. People are going to shop where they see the lowest price, right? And if Amazon has successfully made it so that you can't sell at a lower price anywhere than on Amazon, they're going to continue to attract those customers. And there's so much data around, when times are good, people might be more willing to shop local, support small, shop on values. Now it's really like, where can they stretch their dollar the furthest? And it's often for those goods that they need to run a household. Like that's where we are in most families in Canada right now. People are
Mm-hmm.
just looking for where can they buy what they need at the absolute lowest price. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, whether you like Jeff Bezos as a person or not, or agree with his personal decisions, Amazon has been able to make something that does provide lowest price goods for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And super quickly and super fast, and
Mhm.
for like no shipping costs in most cases if you have a membership. I mean, I think that's so true, and it's a major consideration for people right now. I do shop. I don't shop Amazon often, but I do shop Amazon because diapers and wipes
Mhm.
for my son, like now he's potty trained, but pull-ups are so much cheaper there. And like your last minute, oh my God, like I'm running out, you need to get it to your house quick. And it's way cheaper than going and buying a box off the store shelf. So yeah, absolutely so true around like the price point. And I think like in summing up my rich girl POV on this, consumers want alternatives to giant corporations, and Etsy is offering that. And the products
Mhm.
that they offer, you're not, to your point, a lot of them are artisan. Like you're not going to find those on an Amazon like marketplace anyway. But they're offering it through human connection and putting like actual people who sell on the platform center stage and a bit of like smart humor, right? They definitely are not competing on speed. They're not going to compete on convenience or, to your point, price, because you can't when you're up against the Amazons in the world. So what can you compete on if you're Etsy? And it's more like emotion, identity, values. This is a classic challenger brand marketing. And when you can't win against Amazon on scale, you have to change the conversation. And so this is a fascinating campaign to watch and one that's been on my radar.
I mean, it got us talking. The interesting thing is often as companies grow, and I'd be interested if and when Etsy does grow to, a different level, are their internal PR policies going to prohibit them talking explicitly or inexplicitly about other brands? Because that's often what happens, when you get to a larger scale.
Our next headline today is about this World Cup stadium name cover up, and there's kind of a similarity in I guess like sentiment or feeling around this story as well, because it's well known that FIFA has super strict sponsorship rules, right? Like using FIFA, using the terms World Cup. We see that in many small businesses, locally in Vancouver, because we are one of the host cities for FIFA World Cup. So many stadiums that are hosting World Cup matches have naming rights owned by brands that are not official FIFA sponsors. And so FIFA doesn't want these brands getting free exposure when they haven't paid to be a FIFA sponsor. Even though these brands have paid literally like hundreds of millions of dollars to have their name as a part of the stadium name, their logos everywhere, they're having to cover them up. Even, on seat backs in the stadiums where World Cup games are being hosted, any brand names or language is being covered up with stickers or labels or painted over. Washroom signage, like it's everywhere that these brands are having to be covered up. So the story that started making headlines about this was Levi's Stadium in California, and for World Cup, it was renamed to Santa Clara Stadium. Levi's had to cover up their logo on the outside of the building, and in this moment of what I consider total brilliance, they embraced this absurdity and wrapped the logo so tightly that their logo shape is still visible. And so because that logo shape of the Levi's brand is so distinctive, people could tell that it was still Levi's. So it kind of made it silly to poke fun at this. They also changed their Instagram profile photo to their logo covered up by this like white tarp and just the outside of the shape. They got lots of traction on social media about this. People were sharing it all over the place, and they went ahead and covered up their logo at their Paris flagship store as well. And they kind of created this like fun game around it, posting content using the viral TikTok sound, the audio sound where it's like, they'll never know. They'll never know. And
They're gonna
had
know.
people like have to, yeah, exactly. If you could find our store, this is, like we're in Paris. So the social media team used all of this talking about a lack of visibility to create more, which I just thought was brilliant.
Well, and I wonder legally if they have made this kind of makeshift temporary logo, their logo in the store and their logo on social media, is that actually in contravention of this FIFA policy? Because now what's on social, what's on the Paris store actually matches what is on Levi's or Santa Clara Stadium. So are they going to get into trouble for this? And then even on the other side is, yes, FIFA's so strict, but to your point from earlier, all of these brands have paid a considerable amount of money for sponsorship of these stadiums. What are these stadiums used for? Concerts, sports matches. So is there something that the brands can actually do to challenge this? I think we might see this play out legally, down the line. As a marketing move, super smart. And I think they're getting so much more visibility out of this than they would have if they had just kept their logo. They're actually probably getting more conversation than a lot of the brands who have paid to sponsor. And I think this is a
Mm.
message for, or learning for, so many of the brands who are just thinking, oh, I can throw money at something and get conversation and get conversion. Well, you can get visibility, yes, but what is the impact? You need to make sure you have a smart team that can pull off things like this. Even the Gillette
Mhm.
shaving foam covering up their logo. There's somebody behind it who thought of this. And this is not just a sponsorship, dollars in, dollars out play. And often the best investment that a brand can make is in really smart, creative people on their team who will come up with things like this and leverage moments like this.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about the Gillette logo too, because they tried to get in on this as well. I don't know the timing of everything, like if they came up with this idea separately at the same time or if it happened after. But Gillette had its stadium name covered, but their response was to cover the logo with like simulated shaving foam, like shaving cream, to look like shaving cream. So it was cute. It was clever, but I don't know what you think about this. In my opinion, I thought it was less effective than Levi's because it wasn't instantly recognizable. And like Gillette, for me, it may not be the first brand that comes to mind with shaving cream for everyone. Gillette is not something that's like super top of mind in my case. Maybe I'm just not the audience, but the brand equity that Levi's had around that shape, I think
Mhm.
was more effective than the brand equity that Gillette has around shaving foam.
Don't know if Gillette could have pulled off a wrap like that or if it would have been aligned with the messaging, right? Like the reason I think like Levi's is
No.
effective is because you look at their jeans, you ultimately want your jeans to hug you so tight that you can still see the shape kind of through that. And so by wrapping their logo so tightly, they played on that. I think Gillette did something that was as effective as they could in this space. I actually really like it. I think it, draws enough attention. It's cheeky, and it doesn't take a lot to step back and look at, who is behind this. Like, why is there shaving foam on the stadium? You do a simple search, you get the AI results pretty quickly of, what's going on. And it is I would say like a fairly recognizable, at least growing up, is like we always had Gillette in the house. The way there's like just so much foam that comes out, the pattern of that to me is very Gillette. There's other shaving products like shaving cream, like other shaving foams that don't have as, much of a distinct pattern. So to me, that is like I see that and I'm like, oh, Gillette.
Do you think that Levi's was more effective though than Gillette?
I think Levi's, because of the social traction they were able to get and how they leveraged that, I think that's where all of the pieces came together. But they also could get into more trouble because of that down the line. And that'll be an interesting thing to look at, is because they changed their Paris logo, because they changed their social logo to reflect that, is that going to be in contravention of the FIFA policies around logos at a stadium?
Hmm.
I
I don't
think it's
know.
still well
I mean, I
worth
would
it,
assume that with Levi's, yeah, yeah, I would assume that with Levi's legal team and the size of that organization, that hopefully they would have done their research and made sure that it didn't go against, like, that they found a way through
Yeah.
the policies. But yeah, we'll see. So thinking about the rich girl takeaways from the story, and I think you touched on this a little bit too, is that Levi's understood something that sometimes we forget. Like, attention doesn't come from forcing people to look at you. It comes from giving them something to talk about, like something
Mhm.
worth sharing. And I'm thinking about that a lot lately, like especially with from a social media perspective, is, are you posting content that isn't just like interesting, but is worth sharing? Because those, like, sharing, posting to stories, sending to friends, like that's where we see posts pick up traction organically and really get people talking. So this is super smart. I think it was opportunistic. It seemed very like creator mindset versus advertiser
Mhm.
mindset. And as a result, more people were talking about Levi's than if the logo had just been sitting there in plain sight, or if they had shelled out for the actual FIFA World Cup sponsorship.
Oh, totally.
Okay, and then for our last headline of the day, you wanted to gossip a little bit about Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. So it's been almost a year. July last year was the time when we first started hearing rumors and seeing photos of Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau together. And when you look at them in the tabloids and some of the social content that we're seeing, they seem to be more in love than ever, which, I mean, here for it for them as individuals. But Robin Urbach in the Globe and Mail actually wrote an awesome piece about how this reflects on Trudeau's leadership and time in office, to like just see him as a celebrity boyfriend. And we're seeing this not only in Canada, but you look at who's leading in the US, a former reality TV star. So I see this as like a confluence or convergence of celebrity culture and politics. And I don't necessarily think that this is a good thing. Politics used to be this serious endeavor where, at least from the outside, there was some seriousness to it. And now we're seeing Trudeau skipping the Canadian World Cup game to watch his girlfriend perform in the US. We're seeing him, when you hear him talk about previously about all the plastic cups and don't drink out of plastic and don't use plastic water bottles. And there's all these memes about him with the red Solo cups at a music festival with Katy Perry. And so it breeds this additional just like suspicion around who these people are and what their intentions are. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. We seem to have someone much more serious leading now, but as much as I'm happy for him in what he seems to be happy in personally, I don't think a necessarily good look for us as a country.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to a CBC podcast months ago, and one of the journalists that they had on there, I think, was like a part of the team who followed Trudeau's and went around with Trudeau a lot and like had a relationship with. And they were surprised that after everything that he went through, especially in his last run as prime minister, and the like vitriol online and a lot of the hate that he got and frustration from Canadians and um yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. I did a TikTok at the end of Justin Trudeau's time in office, just saying like despite what I had thought about the last number of years, I was impressed with how he went out. Like it was kind of elbows up Canada period, and there was the interactions with Trump around like the tariffs and calling him governor of Canada and all of that. And I was proud of how he stood up at the end, and he didn't just back down in his last months in office. And having gone through all of that, like you'd almost think like to then choose or fall in love with Katy Perry and choose to be in a relationship with someone like a celebrity of her fame, but also like her infamy. I'm surprised, and the journalists were surprised as well. Like she's not a she's a silly performer, right? Like her whole thing, she's wearing like food costumes, and her music is very like lighthearted and poppy and silly. She's not like a super serious actress or someone who, has really like seriously honed her craft. She's famous, she's poppy, she's good at it, she's good for her for that. But to then end up kind of back in the spotlight for these reasons again is just a bit surprising. Like you'd think that he'd kind of want to pull back or be with someone who, you're not in like the tabloid or the headlines to the extent that he was as a prime minister of Canada. It's fascinating to me. And, she's not had a good number of months either. And it does reflect on him. And I don't know how I feel about it reflecting on Canada, but she was accused of sexual assault by, I think it was Ruby Rose. Did you see that? Yeah. She was accused of sexual assault by Ruby Rose. And then these videos resurfaced of her on, was it The Voice that she was on? Like kissing an underage
Uh-huh.
singer on camera, which was edited in a way that, could be debated as whether it was appropriate or not, or if he consented to having his first kiss be Katy Perry. Like all this stuff is just resurfacing, and those stories have seemed to have died, but he's associated with that. And I don't know, the two of them, like I do think that they have the same level of what I would call cringe factor.
No,
Like
they
that
seem
you
to
just
fit
sometimes some of the stuff
together.
they do or say, like they seem well matched for like their level of cringe. And I do actually like respect Justin Trudeau and a lot of what he did, especially in his first, years of being Prime Minister of Canada. And I don't, have anything against him, but it's just a weird choice. It's like we're in a parallel universe. Tell me more about why you think it reflects on, or how you think it reflects on us, or what you came across in that news article that discussed this as far as making Canada look unserious.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if Trudeau was like throwing up his hands and being like, "I'm just a girl," like that line of like, "I don't know, I'm just a girl." He's just a boyfriend, right? He even cited boyfriend duties as the reason he wasn't at any of the first Canada match, any of the subsequent Canada matches where he would have been seen visibly, and so you look at he was the one ultimately responsible for running the country. And to come off now as it almost looks like he's craving the celebrity, the visibility, the red carpet moments, the social media. And there's not a lot of depth that we're seeing now from him. Normally when a prime minister leaves office, they might join some corporate boards, they might, get involved in charitable initiatives, or they, kind of go quiet a little bit and have that
Mm-hmm.
well-deserved rest. But for Trudeau to just be so visibly, it looks like craving the celebrity that comes with somebody of Katy Perry's kind of caliber and visibility, I think makes him look like, not a serious person, not a serious prime minister. And it makes me think, who was actually making the decisions when he was in office, because there's very little evidence that it was him. And, everybody deserves a little bit of fun, a little bit of, go and be a boyfriend, be, lighthearted. But there's not a lot of depth that we're seeing. And this happens when you, not only for politicians, but when you leave a job, like what you do after, how you speak about that job after reflects on your time there, reflects on your accomplishments. You're not done being a public servant when your actual time is up.
Mm.
So I think he could have handled it in a better way. I think there was, probably his advisors could weighed in a little bit, because the world now is at a very serious time, and the decisions that politicians make are very important and very impactful. And, as voters, you're looking at, who was this person, and who did we elect to run the country? And I think there's a lot more questions than answers now about that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like, the word that came up for me when you were speaking was around legacy. Like, what kind of legacy does he want to leave? And I don't think that, like, being with Katy Perry and having a legacy are mutually exclusive, obviously. Like, it's like she's not responsible for what he's doing and whether he's taking the role of, like, ex-prime minister seriously. Like, that women should not carry that. And so it's not by, like, putting blame or saying that his choice in her means that he can't have a legacy, but some of the stuff that we're seeing in the headlines around, like, the choices he's making about where to represent the country or how to represent the country are something that I wonder if he's thinking about, like, to your point about charitable work or being on boards or, like, still being able to contribute to the reputation of the country, is an interesting one. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And then there's the whole question of, like, from a celebrity gossip standpoint, like, oh, are they going to last? Only time will tell on that. But yeah, I very much wonder what they're like around each other and what life is like for in that relationship for sure.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting too. And like Sophie Trudeau was a former journalist. She's an author in her own right, public speaker. Well known, well respected. To watch them navigate that, I think actually overall they've done a very good job in navigating that. Separation, divorce, in their family. Their kids seem to be handling it well. They're
I
not
agree.
getting all of the spotlight of that. So that is definitely encouraging to see and positive. But somehow she, like Sophie, looks like she's kind of come out as the bigger person here. And she's doing more, serious work, I would argue, than what he's doing now.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see what happens next and what he does with his career once he's kind of, over this period of it's almost like like when you have you're in a long-term relationship and you have a breakup and you're kind of just, like, out partying, having fun, like you're being unserious. It's like he, like, broke up with the country, and so he's kind of, like, doing that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if you look at like the
I
long
mean,
kind of
he is.
trajectory of his career, right? Like the conservatives definitely made fun of him for being like a former snowboard instructor and a drama teacher. And then all of a sudden he became prime minister. Is this, celebrity, red carpet seeking, music festivals, is that actually more in line with who he is? And was the prime minister era a blip in his career? And I think really when you look at like the long-term story of his life, maybe that's what will be the case. And we were just looking for a pretty boy to be prime minister, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. It's all, on the pretty boy subject, it's always interesting to see how politicians age, like, from when they start in office to when they leave. I don't think yeah, you can tell it took a toll on him for sure.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
like
I
it's
think
like me when, how many gray hairs I have 3 years after having my son versus how many gray hairs I had before.
I think that's also just inevitable. That's just life, we all age.
Okay, so what's on your radar right now, Ada? Like, what brands or businesses or trends are you seeing right now that have got you thinking?
Yeah, the most interesting trend is Canada's population is actually shrinking. And it's been shrinking for the past 3 consecutive quarters. And the reason is the lower immigration rate. So it's one thing we're seeing. And then we're also seeing natural population growth declining. And when you look at immigration, it's down 20% over the same quarter last year. And then people, we've talked about this. It's no surprise people are having fewer children. So those things coupled together, we're below the replacement rate for births, and immigration is down. So what does that mean for, retirement? What does that mean for the economy? What does that mean for jobs, housing? So many questions. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. But we'll see how this affects truly like our job market, our overall quality of life, what's happening in Canada. But definitely interesting to see because we've been a country that's grown so much with immigration. I'm an immigrant who came to the country with my parents. So many of my friends are immigrants. What happens when that trend reverses? What happens when you look at who's contributing to the economy? The overall amount of mortgage debt that immigrants are typically willing to take on is more than people who may have been born in Canada. So looking at, putting down roots,
Hmm.
contributing overall to the economy, growing the value of real estate in the country. Uh, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that we're slowing down immigration, but we'll see what the long term effects are here.
That's interesting. I mean, we were just talking about Justin Trudeau, and I know that there was a pretty open immigration policies for, I think it was specifically students, if I'm remembering correctly, and international students. And so, do you know, has there been like specific policy changes that's impacting why immigration has gone down, or?
So a lot of it looks like international students were here on visas that actually were not valid. And so there's been some crackdown around that. And, overall, I think the world has shifted. Most countries are a bit tighter on immigration now, so it's not necessarily unique to Canada. I think we've kind of had like very
Hmm.
open policies, and now maybe taking a bit of a second look at that. They're also, think about like that push pull factor. Is Canada the number one place that people are looking to move now with the cost of living what it is? I know when I talk to my family back home in Poland and kind of compare notes like, okay, cost of living, what's your day-to-day reality? There's a lot of countries in Europe that are looking a bit better than we are in Canada right now. So I think there may be other places that are more of a pull. I know we've seen kind of anecdotally Portugal is a place that a lot of people kind of within our age group, skill set, education level are wanting to move because of primarily cost of living. So is that one of the factors potentially?
Hmm. I do know that I've heard in some news cycles about an influx of physicians, nurses from the US in particular, just like in the healthcare space that I do some work in. There's a lot of people immigrating from the US to Canada, actually. So yeah, fascinating. I'll be interested to see how that plays into business and the economy overall and the trend in the next little while. For me, the thing that I came across that I wanted to share about was this super cool outdoor ad campaign that Polaroid has deployed across New York City in like out of home, so billboards, bus shelters, pushing against AI fatigue and against like phone fatigue and device fatigue. So
Mhm.
they have Polaroid launch this campaign, very like kind of sparsely designed white billboards, white bus shelters with a Polaroid in the center of it. And Polaroid's obviously like this like super tangible, real life thing that prints right away in your hand, capturing moments in your life. So the messaging on it actually is calling out AI. So one of them is a photo of a couple embracing on a beach. It's a Polaroid of it. And the headline is AI can't generate sand between your toes. And another is remember that night we spent on our phones? Me neither. So again, like using real stories, real people. Oh, there's another headline I love, which was real stories, not stories and reels. There's this like Instagram fatigue, social media fatigue, scrolling fatigue. And again, we're seeing a brand creatively use out of home, like real spaces to advertise and kind of challenge and push up against that. Yeah, it's just, there's so much of this consumer sentiment and sentiment of particularly the younger generations, which is fascinating to me. But there was like a commencement speech. I don't remember what university it was at. And so the person who's speaking mentioned AI and that the young, generation in the audience started booing about the adoption of AI. And you always think younger generation equals more text literate. Like in my time, it was like we were the ones using tech, we were the ones embracing it, and the older generations were kind of pushing up against it. And now we're seeing like a switch in sentiment. So yeah, really smart, really creative, and the creative is beautiful. I love the design.
Yeah, I think that university story, if I remember that one correctly, was the students were also told not to use AI in their any of their research or any of their papers, and then being told to adopt it, in that now that they're in the real life, now please use AI. So there might have been like a layer of that in their response as well. I know anecdotally from my kids, they're asking for those digital cameras. You know, those old ones that we had when we were, in high school, university. Those are cool
Mm-hmm.
again. So they're asking for that. And it's like, well, I just spent however much on your phone and that takes a great picture. Why not use that? So they're definitely leaning into that offline world in some ways. I think the ultimate answer is like those two things together, right? Like that offline world, I think there's also an element in the Polaroid campaign of out of home coming back again and
Mm-hmm.
brands really leveraging that in a way that maybe they forgot about for a while. But then also there is a place for
Mm-hmm.
AI
Mm-hmm.
tools and yeah, that being part of the marketing conversation.
Mm-hmm. I also love, like, I just feel like New York is a perfect city for them to roll this out into, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's all we got for you today on our last Rich Girl Rundown segment before we take a quick little break for summer. Let us know what you think about the topics that we've shared today. Tag us with your Rich Girl take. And, I'd love some feedback. So DM on Instagram or send me a note or a comment on Substack. Ada and I would love to hear what you think of the Rich Girl Rundown, as well as what you think of branded assets overall. I'm looking at, what we're going to be focusing on come fall. So if you like what you're hearing, please rate and leave a review and follow us online everywhere. Thanks so much, Ada. I hope you have a wonderful summer.
Thanks. Have a good summer, Kate.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Branded Assets. Power looks better when women are in the room, so thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, follow the show, share it with a friend, and join us on Instagram at Branded Assets. We're just getting started. I'm Kate Bouchard. See you next time.